Now over to Tom Hill, who is a clinical assistant professor here at NYU at the Center for Global Affairs. He is a peace-building practitioner. He's worked a lot in northern Iraq, specifically with the University of Duhok. He is now developing the peace-building concentration. He's actually leading the peace-building concentration at CGA. And Tom himself has been instrumental in setting up the event today. I met Tom in northern Iraq in 2004 or 5 perhaps, just around that time.
Yeah.
And I was lucky to leave our 2-week mission. I think that the day before they were advised that the compound would be attacked. I had another assignment I needed to get to, so I quickly got out, and then a few hours later they were informed that this is the safe room. If we're attacked from that side, you run that way. Tom, fortunately, is with us today, and and we'll, I think, be talking a little bit about the educational aspect also of GPI.
And I have to note, Peter obviously has better timing than I do, so I'll have to see how I can do with these next 8 minutes or so. Thank you, Peter. Thank you to everyone else who's joining me up here today, and to the student groups. I just have to say, I've had several people come up to me and say, wow, the students really thought about this. And yeah, I was impressed with all the different things that I heard. And so I'm going to go in a slightly different direction than some of my colleagues here have gone. But it is sort of dovetailing with something that was brought up earlier, which is this importance of process in all of this. And from my perspective, the process that I'm interested in is actually the one that we're taking part in right now, and the one that at least I take part in here almost every day. And one of the questions that the student groups addressed today was this idea of, sort of what is the, how might the GPI be applied? From the perspective of the different concentrations. And so I get to cheat a little bit on this question, because I think I'm probably, with the exception of Zoe, the only person in the room who's actually been applying the GPI for a couple of years. And several of the students here know that, because I've been using it in classes here, not only here, but also in some teaching that I've been doing in Iraq at a couple of universities. And so when this really started to strike me, the sort of importance of the GPI was, I think it was last March, I was at the brand new American University of Iraq, Suleimani it's called, in the northern part of the country. And I was talking to them about this effort to quantify and to measure peace. I had probably 10 or 12 students in the room. And well, one of the things that I always do is sort of show, well, here are the top 10 and here are the bottom 10. And okay, so the students saw that Iraq was at the bottom, which doesn't surprise a lot of people, but it was a little bit jarring to them. And then when they saw, now the 2010 version wasn't out yet, but they saw that it had been the bottom for 3 straight years, actually a couple of students got very upset. And they, were starting to debate in the classroom why Iraq was actually below DRC and Afghanistan and Sudan. And by the end of this conversation, a couple of students were very firm in their belief. They said, it's our generation's responsibility to bring Iraq from the bottom of this index to the top. And that's when the light went on for me and said, okay, so I know that people have methodological problems with the index, and that there are issues related to how certain scores are weighted and which indicators are used and all of that. But there's sort of a bigger point here, which is that, and I see this every semester here teaching in the master's program, which is that every group of students responds a little bit differently, but they all respond. This is actually a very interesting idea for people to begin thinking about. The questions come up every time. Why is it that the United States lands somewhere in the low-middle range of the index pretty consistently, right? Some of those issues have been brought up, and I've had students push me on and say, well, then why does everybody in the world want to move here? And what is the understanding of peace on which the GPI rests? Well, we've talked about that a lot today. And why might a particular state care where it ends up in the GPI? So, the fact that these questions are being raised, discussed in classrooms in both Iraq and the US is almost justification enough to me for continuation of the effort. So what is the GPI? Well, it's a paradigm changer. I'm not an economist or a statistician, and I am not a heavily qualitative, I don't take a heavily qualitative approach to my own research, so I'm not going to veer too much into this. There are people sitting beside me here who are much more qualified. But what's interesting is it certainly does catalyze different thinking about peace. I'm the son of a second colonel who served in the United States Army in both World War II and the Korean War, so I'm very familiar with the line of thinking that more armed service personnel and heavy weaponry are the way towards securing peace. This is what I kind of grew up hearing in my house as a child. Well, what the GPI does, of course, is it encourages us to think critically about this assumption. Now, it's less important for us to decide that it's correct or incorrect, but to actually have this open debate and to really think about it openly. And what it does is it encourages us, I think, to think about peace as a dynamic rather than as a static conception. And I think it was Mark who talked about, you know, the light switch, or somebody mentioned the light switch earlier. You know, and it's not a light switch, you know, but to help more people understand that peace is not something that's just, you know, absent one day and present the next, as so many people have mentioned. It's a process unto itself. It's the product of a process. Something the GPI helps in that regard. And so what I see as the greatest use for this, in addition to the others that have been brought up, are the usefulness in education. Not only at the graduate level, not only at the university level. I'm personally happy to see this effort in the state of Maryland to develop curriculum at the secondary level. And I said to Zoe earlier that I think, you know, seeing this as low as the primary level would be great. Because once again, even here at the graduate level, the hardest question that I pose to students all the time, and many of you are here, comes on the first day of class when I say, what is peace? And what do I normally get? I get a lot of blank stares back at me. So that's sort of why, you know, why is that? You know, and then every semester students tell me they have plenty of images of war and violent conflict in their heads, but very few images of peace. Why is that? So I point to education and media as the sort of, you know, causal, part of the causal chain there. And so what does the Global Peace Index do? Does it help us to concretize what is meant by peace? I think it might. You know, thinking that states have to make choices and that the outcomes of these choices, you know, are tangible ones that can result in states of peace, or you know, or in direct violence, or in cultural violence, or in structural violence. That's all very important, and it brings me back to thinking about what Herb Kelman has written for much of his career, but going as far back as the 60s, when he said, you know, attitudes are merely the collection of images that individuals create and hold of other people, groups, and objects. So if something like the Global Peace Index, if not the Global Peace Index itself, can help to provide future leaders and citizens with fresh images, that creates the opportunity for new attitudes and behaviors to emerge. At least that's my thinking about it here. So, you know, lastly, you know, I don't want to sort of leave this without criticism. Yes, I think many valid, specific criticisms related to how we take into consideration these complicated factors, like what happens when the United States is sort of helping to provide security for other states that end up being ranked more highly is a valid concern. From other academics in the past, you know, I've heard about this idea that, well, there may be no statistical meaning in this kind of index. And I imagine, Jake, you hear this yourself also, right? There's, you know, the indicators in the weighting system are either arbitrary or so clearly developed to support a particular political agenda that they're virtually meaningless. And I would say, fair enough. The GPI is a well-crafted political project, and it has a clear political agenda, and that's fine. I think, you know, we know what that object is. It's to encourage the development and adoption of policies that will, reduce direct structural cultural violence and lead to an overall increase in the well-being of humans worldwide. So I don't think anybody's going to confuse the GPI with some sort of absolute measure of anything anyway. So for that reason, I find a lot of value in it, just as a, as a catalyst for thinking, and it tells me that there's some success and some merit to it, simply because we're all still here at 4:25 p.m. on a Friday afternoon. So, and I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for that. and also for bringing GPI to the Center for Global Affairs in your classroom and now also today. I was thinking that the transnational security presentation did suggest a new name for the GPI, peace and security. Is it something you think might be a better way to reach a broad audience, and how would that impact your teaching, do you think? So maybe to think about that.